And we're live. Actually, I didn't even look at the number. We're Vlog Thursday 415. Every time I see that number get bigger, I'm like, that's 415 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a lot of years of doing this. Oh, man, this is great. I love having Brett Kelly on here from 45 Drives coming out of Nova Scotia, right? You're still there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nova Scotia, we're not leaving. Well, actually, yeah, we are.
The reason I asked is because I seen your post that I don't know if you were among the people that were going to be at the or hanging out at least at your new U.S. office. So that is awesome news.
Yeah, so that's I haven't been yet. I will go soon. I think in the new year. Actually, my rotation in the schedule is perfect because, like you said, up here in Nova Scotia, winter sucks. And so I think I'm going down in February. So a North Carolina trip in February will be a great break from the winter. But for those who didn't hear what Tom's referencing, we 45 Drives, headquartered here in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And we've recently expanded to Wilmington, North Carolina, where we're expanding our sales, service, assembly, and everything. So, 45 Drives US.
That is exciting. I can't wait to come down there and see it. That's not too well. Geographically, Nova Scotia is not that far, but logistically, it's difficult to get there because there's challenges getting in and out of Nova Scotia.
Yes, there is. And Air Canada, it's your fault. But the last live stream I did with our crew, I think Craft Computing, Jeff and I ragged on them for long enough. So we'll leave that alone. No, and that is a problem and something we've addressed, not just for getting down and back and forth in the U.S. office, because, like, I don't know, anyone who's expanded a business or done anything like that is operations and everything but culture. You're entering a new group. We've got to maintain the culture with it. It's so important to us here that, like, making sure our customers are the hero of their organization, that type of being. So easy way to communicate back and forth, and obviously electronically, but like getting people in and out are nice. So so we've got a company plane now too, so we can go back and forth from Wilmington, and we've used it to do a couple sales visits around too. So we feel that same pain, and honestly, we got the plane before we got the office.
Well, priorities,
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
you got to have the plane. The plane makes the office more accessible anywhere it might pick to be. So
exactly.
Max Telecom Networks is from Canada, so he feels the pain. He knows all about it. I had something I was consulting on the other day, so stop me if you've heard this joke before.
Yep.
We bought a bunch of consumer drives for our database application on Ceph, and it doesn't seem to be performing very well. That's a common story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And first question, were they hard drives or were they NVMe drives?
NVMe, consumer NVMe.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Surprise, the consumer hard drives real quick. Consumer and enterprise, the enterprise are built a little better and everything like that, but performance-wise, they work pretty similar. But those NVMe drives, those consumer NVMe drives, they'll get you. Mitch, my colleague, we've met many times, or you guys have. He's done quite a few consulting tickets for people where that comes in, and those. It's funny how different they are, and then they don't do a great job at marketing what those differences are.
Yes. So there's always this assumption that you can just simply grab those and they'll perform well. And I mean, it's not that Ceph can't perform well. There's just circumstances around it where the planning stages are critical, because you really have to think about what drives you're going to buy, what the queue depth is if you're using those consumer NVMe ones. And then there's obviously some level of danger with they don't have the memory protections in case of power outage. So,
And honestly, I've almost gotten so lucky because, like you said, all the things to consider, but we get the buy-in of using enterprise drives and enterprise NVMEs and everything so much that they just work.
Mm-hmm.
They work great. Good Micron, Kiox, all those great brands. So
and people see the price difference and they're thinking, it's some type of endurance to it or something like that, and it's not the case. There's actually, like you said, it's not easy for me to point you at a chart of why you need a Kioxia versus the one that you found on sale on the Amazon Prime Day.
And exactly. It's not just the endurance, and even myself right now, Mitch has explained it to me a bunch of times, and I'm just like, okay, gotcha. But it's complicated and it changes a lot.
Yes.
There's another thing, like I'll sit here. I love, and people call them spinning rust and stuff, but I love hard drives. Why? Because they're predictable. I know what they're going to do. They haven't
Yeah.
changed much, but the NVMe's, you go from generation to generation, and
There's some
stuff.
substantial differences in the way they talk, a lot of it has to do with the way they do command queues. And I know I've actually read through it, but I don't feel as articulate. Like I always gesture to the documentation. I tell people, I was like, read this. I have not memorized it as well as I should have, but I understand the problem. And that was what they had run into, was their Ceph system. It's one of those things in concept. Like I like that Proxmox builds it in. 2 thumbs up, man. That's great. But it doesn't negate the planning you need for your application. If you're going, and by the way, this is also someone who racked this in a data center before they found out and tried to move a production database application there. So things were falling over. They're like, yeah, this testing went really poorly. And I'm like, yeah, that's all consumer. And they just made the assumption, because if they read how many megabytes per second it writes, they assume that's the only number you really need to look at.
Yeah. No, more than that. But like you said, it's the planning. I think everyone, there's certain, like, oh, this, if you don't sit down and make a plan, well, what's the old cliche saying? If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail.
You're planning to fail.
As you know, I've been burned. You get burned by that. It's like, it'll kill you. You go and you're writing software or something like that, and no clear architecture, and then all of a sudden you're halfway through, and then you're changing hodgepodge and some stuff, and then you're just like, oh, I've forgotten what the original point of this was. And well, make that plan.
Yeah, it's how we end up with so much spaghetti code, because people are. I like the Pi KVM project. I've talked about it before, but all of us, when we started playing with the Jet KVM, it's one of those things where the Pi KVM, someone was solving a problem and they wrote some code and worked their way towards a solution. Then comes out this little device, and it's on Kickstarter, so it's not fully released yet, but they have sent some of the products out to some of us people review. When you use it, you're like, oh, this is what the Pi KVM was supposed to be. This is that polished interface. This was written by a top tier coder with a plan and a vision to build this.
An architecture.
Yeah. And like the whole discussion, like when they, even though it's a Kickstarter one, the documentation level they have, even when they send it out for us to review, this is clearly not their first rodeo when it comes to making a well-polished product. They even had details in there going, the product we sent you will have slightly different screws when it ships, just so you know, and let the audience know. I'm like, that's attention to detail. Like every little, like even the materials, they said these will be the material changes we make from the actual product. Just like, the review product has these changes, let your audience know type things. And I did skip the screws will be a different color part, because they don't match right now, but they will match at production is what they're saying. But I'm like,
but the forwardness, that's
there.
How you do pre-release, right? Because the old classic style, you could go, you can go full Cybertruck and just say, here's this thing, and then it comes out 4 years later when you figure it out. Or you could do the old style of thing where it's like, until it's perfect, all the marketing's been done, boom, big release. No, you just do these little trickle releases, and you're very clear. And like software projects are so good at that, like the alpha and everything like that. So it's nice to see the physical products starting to follow that as well, where it's just like, here's a pre-release, here's what's going to change, here's what won't change. Then they take that feedback and build it in and everything. It's nice to see.
Yeah. I will answer this question real quick. It says, hey, Tom and Brett, what are your thoughts on a non-router TP-Link network gear? I've never been a big fan. I've reviewed the TP-Link in the past. I've always felt like they're slightly cheaper, way more buggy products, but they save you some money. But apparently the part that shocked me is not that they're banning them. It's that how much of the government's been using them. That's the part that was like, why is there so much of this in the government? That was the only surprising part about that. I actually find we actually just deployed, for example, and I haven't finished reviewing this. We ran into a really weird problem with some fs.com switches. And now fs.com is those companies that makes these generic switches. And you may not think about the number of buffers on a switch, because there's always enough buffers. So this is not a concern with your enterprise products. Well, we had a customer and we didn't think about it either. We put in nice hardware. They put in an fs.com switch. We had some of the weirdest problems on their storage network that we traced down to. There's some problems that we had to dig around to email the people at fs.com, get a firmware update to fix some of these weird buffer problems.
Weird.
Yeah. When you get into some of them, I can't tell if some of these, and TP-Link's like the closest to a brand name off brand you can get. I can't tell if they're malicious or just inept. at the way they build things, because there's always worries about backdoors. I said I think the backdoors are probably there, but not because I wouldn't call them backdoors. They're just bugs that no one fixes.
Yeah.
That Cisco Talos did a whole report on how bad all the security flaws that they found in TP-Link were about 3 months ago. And I'm like, just not enough people are poking at them. And when someone advanced, like the Cisco Talos threat researchers go, I wonder how bad the security is in there. 19 CVEs later.
Yeah, lit up like a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness, yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that about the FS switches as well, because we've used them a bit in our lab here just because, well, honestly, they're switching, especially coming out of COVID there, was hard to get hands on, like, let alone get a price from someone. So FS, I think one of the reasons why people buy from them too is pretty easy to get it from the store. Nice price, but like, again, you're always there's always a bit of a trade-off, right?
Yeah. And it's weird because there were several FS switches. Only one of the models had all these problems. The other models were slightly more expensive versions. Those ones were fine. And we got LACP set up because we set them in a full redundant setup. Everything worked fine. The MLAG worked. Like, it was a little goofy in the documentation. It was hard to figure out where the save running config command was. It was like, we had to dig around for that.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't what we expected it to be, but it did work, and that switch worked fine. So that's also becomes the challenge of, it's hard because people ask me to review the fs.com switches. I'm like, which one?
Yeah.
They're so, like, I know fs.com will send me the flagships, but you may not buy the flagship. You want to know, hey, the one that's about half price and on sale right now, how's that one work?
Yeah. And then CLI all changes and stuff. And I guess, that's what you're buying. You get, everything's got its pros and its cons.
I've always found MakerTick to be the good in-between solution for people looking for something cheaper than some of the enterprise. MakerTick's decent at the documentation. They're a little, I always call them quirky, but you can figure it out. And there's always, my favorite quote was on my forum, someone who was giving a lot of MakerTick advice. They said, MakerTick are weird, but if you Google, you'll find a secret incantation in one of their forums that you'll copy and paste that'll work. And no one will tell you why those set of commands make that problem go away, but it does, and you just accept it and hit save. And I said, fair.
Fair. It'll work for some people.
Yeah. Question. Proxmox via VM storage via TrueNAS NFS with 4. Oh, right on the topic here. For Samsung 970 EV Plus 2 RAID only has 40 megabyte disk over 10 gig interface. How can I improve this? I think this is probably, without knowing all the details of your TrueNAS server, I have a feeling this might be a consumer drive problem again.
Yep. Most likely.
Yeah. What they can write versus what the board can write. It's also bifurcation. The way writes are distributed amongst the NVMe ports, like those cards are popular. You can find them on Amazon that you can like take one PCIe card and then throw 4 NVMEs on there. And then people right away realize, hey, wait, I suddenly have substantially lower performance. Yes, because once you set that slot to bifurcation, you cut down the number of PCI lanes. So functionally, you have that much storage. Performance-wise, you don't have that much bandwidth. And it could be that issue. It's hard to say exactly, but yeah, this consumer NVMe drives don't always play as nice in systems like that.
Yeah, and also on top of that too, just go through your basic performance troubleshooting. Because again, you're from layer to layer, you're getting that. I don't know, drop a layer off, get rid of NFS. What are you seeing? You never know. If you go all the way back down to the disk, since it's that Z pool, there you go. But usually it's somewhere in the middle. But don't forget to go through that as well.
Well, and it's let's see. So did you even run iPerf? I have a lot of times that I help people troubleshoot. I have a thing I've repeated so much, it's become a joke comment on my channel a lot. Quit routing storage. And same thing with consulting. I'm getting poor performance. That's often how the consulting starts. But I'm like, why is the storage on a different subnet than the VMware server, the Proxmox server, whatever else? Oh yeah, it runs through my firewall. Like, no, please quit routing NFS to the firewall. That's
you reminded me, and I can't go into too much detail, but there's a cluster we built for a customer, and it's working fine. But my goodness, the amount of microsegmentation, like every server was on a different subnet, and security reasons and stuff. And anyway, we made it work. remember what we're here for. We're here to solve our customers' needs, and they have that requirement, and that's the rules they put into place. We tried very hard to explain to them why they didn't need to do this. And we met in the middle on some things like that, but you just kind of gave me the willies when you started to say that story again. But I love it. Stop routing storage.
Stop routing storage.
Yeah.
I have a story. I said it too many times. And I said, you know what? I'm not telling people what to do instead. So now I have a storage design video I did, and now I share that video out as a reply. I say, stop routing storage for further explanation. And I got a short code for the video, lawrence.video/storage design. And I'm like, I reply that in the comments all the time because it's just such a frequent, repetitive problem. I kind of miss why people do that. Routing iSCSI is even worse and more painful. We had someone, they were routing, they said it's iSCSI, internet SCSI. I'm like, well,
no.
I want to say where they had the failure point was their IDS program they were using, like Snore Suricata, decided it was a threat. I'm like, that didn't go well when it stopped iSCSI going across the router. First, I was amazing it worked. Second, then it didn't, and everything was less amazing.
Yeah. Oh, iSCSI. Yeah, no, it'll give you enough challenge as it is. Don't route it.
Yeah, don't route that either.
You masochist.
So why is ZFS over iSCSI not really a thing? So if you present iSCSI as block storage, you can format it in ZFS, but there's not a lot of benefits to formatting a file system just in ZFS over block storage. So, I mean, the advantage of ZFS is if you have, and obviously you could do this, you could present a lot of iSCSI LUNs and create a ZFS VDEV out of iSCSIs. That would be some unusual, like someone did it as a lab, I'm sure. I don't recommend this for production, but the benefit of ZFS is when it can talk to hardware directly, like a series of drives. That gives you your bit rot protection. It gives you your VDEVs. And as you configure it, there's ways to get more performance out of it. And of course, we have like all the special VDEVs. So yeah, ZFS over iSCSI, I wouldn't recommend that as a thing.
Yeah, I agree. And mainly even to like just the kind of, like we said about the lab, why not? Just to see if you can.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's the point of a lab. But yeah, so you're going to have an iSCSI block. So yeah, so you got block storage, iSCSI. You connect that to a Windows machine, right? Or VMware. Because like there's other cleaner ways to get block storage into a Linux system than iSCSI. Okay, right. So if you're doing that, most likely it's a Windows system or VMware or something that eats that or consumes that, sorry. And I don't have ZFS. So I just think it's one of those ones. It's just like, the only one who's going to be able to do it is putting those iSCSI blocks into a Linux system or maybe BSD. I guess I always forget about BSD. And it's just kind of one of those, like, I think there's a better way to skin the cat.
Yeah. Well, for the hell of it, and I thought about maybe building another one because I happen to have a box I found of USB drives. I'm like, I built RAID out of USB because, I don't know, it was a funny, silly project, right? I had a bunch of them. And now I got a bunch of USB 3.0 ones again. And I'm like, can I build a VDEV I'm like, how well will it work? Let's play. Let's
find out.
Yeah. So there's but I would never ever recommend something like that for production. It's kind of like fun. It's one of those fun little project ideas.
Yeah, no, and they make good videos too, because then you try it out and you never quite know where it goes. Like we always like doing that.
Well, Wendell did his really cool Thunderbolt one.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And that's clever. It was surprising how the networking over Thunderbolt was so fast. I mean, it was 40 gigabit with a few cables. And because he used so many PCs that all have like a pair of Thunderbolts on there, I'm like, this is kind of a novel, clever home lab. I mean, would I sell this as a production unit? No, but I think you can build a budget failover home lab with high performance between them better than you would expect with this.
Yeah. I'd expect nothing else from Wendell. He always pull something crazy out.
Oh, I think they're asking for something maybe a little different here. The follow-up question was, it would create ZVols through SSH and then expose via iSCSI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I have seen this. This is weird, but it's like the Proxmox head end can SSH in and do all the commands on the back end of the storage server. I mean, you're right. It's going to be a weird thing because the TrueNAS does it. They have their own API for things. So I imagine that's why it doesn't work in TrueNAS, because you're not doing it through the API. TrueNAS doesn't have a normal config file. it's all saved in a database. But if you were to load Linux and in Houston, because Houston reads from config files, just normal ones, it probably would work with Linux in Houston. So there's, yeah. So if you were going to do it, you probably just wouldn't have TrueNAS on the back end.
Yeah,
your ZFS server should be running Houston.
And I guess, and where would we be calling this from Proxmox? I missed.
Yeah, I've seen this, and I've never tried this. There's an option in Proxmox.
Yeah,
where you tell Proxmox to SSH in and do the storage config, so it's running the commands needed to do the provisioning.
Gotcha.
Neat. I don't, when you're setting up and building out something, for example, like we build out client projects like this all the time. We're in there, we'll build the NFS shares on the server and we'll build the iSCSI, but it's not something we're in there all the time doing. Once it's done, it usually sits there for the next 5 years until the hardware refresh. So
exactly,
novel that I can automate it through Proxmox, but that's not where my pain point is as far as managing storage.
Yeah, and I think you covered it well too. Same with us, is like everyone sees it in there, but no one really knows what it does because no one really touches it too much. And I think that hits it right there. It's not super useful. Yeah.
Let's see.
Actually, speaking Proxmox, you got a question there.
Oh, yeah, let's answer it real quick here. Can you attach a Jet KVM to a KVM switch in order to control? We need to test which ones it works with, but yeah, Wendell, I think, had some. I literally don't have any KVM switches. I got rid of them all. So the Jet KVM is meant for a one-to-one with a machine, but I think people will work out a compatibility list for ones you can send commands over to switch. Because you could do that with the Pi KVM. They have a list of, like, if you buy this KVM, you can buy a Pi KVM, and then you can buy a standard, like, one where you're going to hold some key combination to switch between devices. But the cool thing with Jet KVM is it's got an expansion port with a switch on there. So you could, if you get one of those, I can't remember who made them. There's ones that got the little button you can press once to cycle through. You could do the same thing with Jet KVM, just tie the wires together out of their expansion port and be like cycle, and it will cycle through all the options. So there's ways, if there's a will, there's a way to build this in your home lab.
Nice.
Yeah, what were you saying about Proxmox?
Well, they announced today an alpha of something they've been working on called their data center manager. I don't know if you saw that. No, I got the notification today, but they just made another, kind of think vSphere style of like a single pane of glass for all your Proxmox instances.
Oh, that's cool.
Single server. Yeah. Anyway, I installed it earlier today. Works kind of cool. Still alpha mode, but I'm loving the new development in Proxmox. They're putting a lot of effort, new things coming out of it
this goes for both, because I'm a fan of both Proxmox and XCP-ng.
Yeah.
And I think what they're realizing, and one of the reasons we like XCP-ng, is they have that single pane of glass when you have, because the term in VMware is called stretch cluster.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing in Xen. You can have not only what the equivalent of stretch cluster is, but one of the projects we're working on right now is I posted about some servers. They're the I think Supermicro still calls them the Big Twin, but they're the models that have 4 blades per 2U. So we have a bunch of those that we're doing for a client, but half are going in one location, half are going the other. But then we use one control plane with Xen for each one of their data centers, so they can have one pane of glass to see all of their stuff. The biggest client we have has it across 4 data centers, geographically dispersed. It's pretty wild, and they love it because XCP-ng can even do migrations between data centers for them with one pane of glass. They can actually migrate and say, like, take this VM and send it over there. They have enough speed between the data centers to make that happen.
And that's what's coming in this Proxmox Data Center Manager too. So,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm all here for this open source revolution, because I'm sorry, VMware, you made a grave mistake, but also a great one for us.
Yeah, I know. It's thanks, Broadcom.
Because there's so many people willing to contribute code and kind of go, all right, this is what we got to invest in. This is our future as technical people, because I contribute back, you guys contribute back to all the code. So I'm here for it. And matter of fact, it's not just one code base. We have 2 competing products, and the competition's good in the ecosystem.
Yes, absolutely. And and again, I'll say it again. Thanks, Broadcom, for buying VMware and doing what you did, because the old adage, tree falls in the forest and leaves room for the other ones to grow up. And
Yep. And that's
but then
happening.
we all think of community and contributing to open source projects are users and stuff like that. But don't forget, businesses are users, major organizations. And that's why, like with us, with Ceph on the Ceph Foundation, there's so much of the development comes from the massive companies using it, and it's good for everyone. And so the more that these enterprise giants fall and we get to see Proxmox and XCP, I know you guys always have it anywhere, but that more that you can get it out of the home lab and into the enterprise. And again, thank you, Broadcom, for letting this happen, because then the investment comes in. People spend the money, people spend the time. And then again, thank you to Proxmox developers, XCP, for then driving the whole system just goes. It's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
I always remind people, I don't really code, but I create documentation. So I've contributed back to all these projects, and a lot of you can. Some, one of the things that's very helpful is if you're bilingual. I am not, but it's kind of cool. That's gets highlighted a lot in open source projects. Hey, we have an entire French version of this. We have another, what other language? Because English may be dominant, but it's certainly not the only language. So
yeah, no, and well said there too. The contribution part, like, I mean, when I started in open source type work here at 45, you go right to thinking, well, I'm just going to have to commit code. That's the only way you contribute. No. You just literally being in the community, talking to people. Documentation is almost more important than the code working. That's not true, because you need code working to have documentation. But my God, doesn't matter how good your stuff is. If you don't have docs, it doesn't work. So like just being a doc writer is useful. Contribute financially. Usually that's more for the organizations and stuff that are consuming it and giving it back. Your time. And here's the other one that no one does, and we even here need to be better and better at it, is reporting issues that you find. Like the devs won't fix stuff if they don't know it's broken. And they don't use it the same way you do it. And
it usually works in dev because you found a use case or an implementation that doesn't. So I'm definitely, when you think about it from when you report things back to devs, make it repeatable. Explain the steps that you can't just say it don't work, because then devs will close a ticket.
Chasing ghosts. That's what we call it here. It's like I'm chasing a ghost. I can't find it. You got to give me something here.
So walk through the steps and document it really well. And then you can have a better interaction, because recently I think I may have found a bug in HA proxy. But the reason I haven't submitted it yet is because it takes a certain set of conditions to make it happen. And, but it will solve a lot of people's problems. So I'm excited that I'm excited to report it once I can make a reproducible version of the problem.
Nice. Yeah.
Are there plans to make a UniFi backplane? All right. We got a head nod on that one.
Yes, there is.
All right.
So everything with Homelab and everything we do here, it'll all start with the enterprise side of things. As we do more things up there, it then trickles down and ends up in the other products. So there will be a U3 backplane, because we are working on that for moving everything to UBM and U3 as time goes on. And this is the same, because that same backplane that we use in the HL15 are the same ones we use in our enterprise, because direct wired, mass speed, all those great, awesome things about the Stornators. So short answer, yes. Less fun answer, when? Stay tuned.
Yep.
Not in the next few months.
Takes a little while.
But it's coming. Just orders of priority and stuff like that. But yeah, it's coming. It will come.
Yep. I actually closed the wrong question. Someone asked, and I don't know the answer to this at all, they were asking about the TRX4 coolers. I don't know. I'm not familiar with those.
TRX4 coolers fit in the HL15. I thought would fit, doesn't. Michael, I do not know off the top of my head, but you can email info@Homelab and myself directly, B. Kelly. I said that live, so great. Just only Michael, not everyone else, at 45. And I'll make sure we get someone to help you out and get the right thing, because we have a great representative. His name's Vikram, who runs our Homelab Center and the line of business and everything like that. And he deals with these a lot, so I'll make sure you get answered. So why don't you throw in an email at info@homelab.com? Vikram will respond pretty quickly.
Yep. Also, post in the forums over that 45 drives. It's a good
Thank you. I
topic.
forgot about my own forums and my own rule of reporting things in community.
Yeah,
so thank you, Tom.
I encourage a lot of people posting in the forums, because other people have Googled HL15 fitting TRX4 cooler, and I would be great to have the result be a discussion on it, because I want to replace the fans in my HL15, and my first search landed me in a forum, so it was great.
Great, it's working then.
Yeah, they're working. Off topic, I just telling your wife that you're the one clearly explained CF said she told me to buy you coffee, so here you are. Thank you very much. I much appreciate the donation. Yeah, I just released another PF Sense. I actually appreciate what someone said. I did a PF Sense video. It's a little bit longer, and it's all about setting up WireGuard tunnels and the peers, and how there's no client server concept in WireGuard. And I broke down how the peers, how static routing is. And someone said, I love all the tail scale and overlay networks that work like magic, that I don't have to know anything. He goes, but I like that this is real networking and understanding how all of this magic actually works. And I said, yeah.
And it's magic. It's black magic. Networking is black magic.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to it. And because I've been in the networking ecosystem for so many years, I get the appreciation for things like Tailscale, because they take all the complexity out of it, and they're like, all your devices just talk to each other. How? They just do.
Yeah.
And that's great. But it's when I break down like a network engineering video, like even Tailscale uses the same functionality behind the scenes. So just magically handling keys and peers and everything else behind the scenes, which is great, if you just want something to work. But for those someone has to make Tailscale work. So at some point, it's like when we use the term serverless, which drives me bananas in my industry. It's not serverless. There's a server behind all of it.
Yeah.
They just extracted away your thoughts and go, here's a WordPress instance. But it does run on a server somewhere, but we called it serverless WordPress.
Because it's it's easy. Yeah, it's obfuscate everything. It's interesting you say that, right, too, because Tailscale, there's the amount of engineering and skill and planning you have to put in to make a product that does something so complicated and makes it that easy is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
And I love it, because then you get all this adoption and people can do things, and then we can all build off things faster and faster, because now you've got these tools, and I don't have to spend all this time being a network genius to figure it all out. But if you go down that route too far, like if you go down that road too far, and like everyone kind of loses the art of the old style of doing it, like you lose a little bit of the magic. And I don't know. I think you can go back and look even like Apple and the iPad and everything, and how easy it made computing that anyone could do it now.
Yeah.
But you talk to some people who've only ever used those kind of devices, and they're just like, what's a file explorer? What? Just like the concept of a file structure and everything like that. They're just like, I don't know what that is. But they can use the technology better than anyone else. So I don't know. My point is, you can't ever lose the magic of the old way, but my God, you love it when they make it simple too.
Yeah. I appreciate the engineering that goes into something, because there's a ratio, if you will. The easier it is to use, the harder it was to engineer.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And I've told many people, they ask me about, they want to understand networking a little bit better, or subnetting. And I'm like, if you go to Tailscale and they have a whole documentation of how NAT works, it is incredibly, incredibly detailed. And it talks about every form of NAT, and several I hadn't heard of in my career, or maybe heard of in a textbook, but never implemented.
Yeah.
And they walk you through each one of those scenarios of how they do it. They have the equations, they have the process. One of the things, it's not documentation. It is an engineering document for how they built Tailscale, because it can do something that I'd not seen anyone previously do. If me and you are both behind a enterprise, or not enterprise, like a wireless ISP that's providing CGNAT, and we're both using Tailscale, it is smart enough to not go out to the internet and stay within the carrier's network and not go to the public internet. And they talk about how they solve that problem of getting two people on the same carrier grade NAT to talk to each other without hairpinning out to the global internet.
Now that is open source at its
just like how we solve this engineering problem, like the things they have diagrams of all of it. It's just like,
that's awesome.
It's a learning opportunity for sure.
Well, back to our other point of like, documentation is almost as useful or more than the actual product you make.
Yeah, there was with the video I released on PF Sense, one of the topics that came up was, well, Tom, what about OpenWRT? What about OpenWRT? And I said, I don't use it because it's not very full featured. And they're like, well, we can't find many videos on it because, and there's not much documentation. Can you make a video on it? So there's some documentation. I'm like, well, that's the cart and horse problem.
Yeah.
I don't use it. There's not documentation for me to read from to do a video. Cause my favorite comment that I love and hate is the people who say, all you do is read documentation and make videos. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's a good career. Are you jealous? I can't tell. Are you trying to insult me?
Yeah, you're here, man.
Or you're just trying to describe what I do.
Yeah. It's so much more.
It's so much more. But no, it is a challenge because I think that's one of the reasons the OpenWRT project has not. It's a very niche hobby project for the firewalls. I think it's cool. I don't have anything against it, but it seems to be missing some of the documentation. It doesn't have a ton of tutorials. So without that community around it, it becomes very hard. I've always had a good time in making all the different videos I have on storage or TrueNAS and things like that. And it's because I'm pulling from the documentation and practical usage. Yep. Even when I've covered the Houston stuff, you guys have it documented. It's all on GitHub. I was able to go, oh, cool. Here's all the instructions on how to set it up. And then I can explain it better. And I think that goes a long way to first starting with, we got to write the code that makes the stuff work, but then getting it to the market to usage does require that level of documentation, tutorials, use cases. I've heard them called, who was it? Is it one of the security companies? Wazoo. I actually like it. They have a whole bunch of how it works, but they have a whole thing. I think they call their recipes. And what the recipes are is, here's a scenario. We're going to walk you through how to set up this scenario. Maybe you have this scenario, and they walk you through step-by-step of how to do different things that are very common tasks that you would do with a tool like that. And I kind of like that. And pfSense uses the same term. I think they call them recipes as well. Like, oh, you want to do a server with these functionalities for user management with a radius server, etc. Here's a step-by-step guide on how to make that function work, because it might be something you're interested in. So they don't just give you documentation that they have a radius server you can click and install, and they have OpenVPN that you click install. They give you the other piece you need of how to make those things talk to each other as a user management, or maybe you want to put them on a certain network and follow rules with the the radius system, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, and it gives you a practical end goal, and I love that too. Especially, it's kind of what I want to say. It's that concept of we're going to provide you the best practices as we found them, but we'll lay that path out. But we won't put any guardrails on the path. If you want to leave at one point and branch off and go another way, that's fine. And that's kind of where you're you can't go full open source. You're there's a source code, figure it out. You could do that. But because it goes back to what you said about Open WRT there, there's the chicken egg. There's no documentation. You want videos on it. Okay, well, if there's no documentation, it better do something or solve a problem, a novel problem for me, such that it's worth it for me to feel around in the dark room to figure out how it works, document it and stuff like that. If it's not solving a new problem for me and you're not making it easy for me to learn or use it, I'm just not touching it. I just don't. I can't. I don't have time for that. I don't want to. So, yeah.
It is that challenge. And the other, because a few people had asked, because OpenWRT, and this is reasonable, but not a killer price. They started doing, obviously OpenWRT became popular because it was the Linksys systems. You could reflash your router with the free open source OpenWRT. And so they had a whole list of, ASUS routers, Linksys, blah, 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 all these consumer boxes, and you could reflash them into OpenWRT. Well, those consumer boxes slowly seem to have become back to their proprietary. A lot of these companies go, I don't want you to be able to swap the firmware, and that is definitely a hobbyist thing. So they came up with these open source boards, and it's a full open source design and everything else. But the downside is their circuit boards that will produce a router are about $100, and you're getting up there into a price point that you can go back to buying something like UniFi is in the $150 range for routers that has way more features than OpenWRT. So it becomes the selling point of OpenWRT is cool. It's open source, and I'm a huge open source advocate, but also I need all the features to work.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's things that are open source that I can't use because they're not feature complete. NVR is the thing. Frigate's cool, but Frigate's not something I can install 100 cameras at a client.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a novel project that you could then do some object recognition in, but it's not exactly a enterprise replacement for the features and functionality you get out of NVR. And the same thing goes with the firewalls. We kind of expect our firewalls to have lot of features, a nice web UI to do these things. And yeah, that's kind of where the hang up is on that for some of those.
Gotcha.
Any plan to release an HL15 with an EPYC CPU?
Same as my other answer. Yes.
Yeah.
But when? We'll see. What I want to talk about there is don't forget you can always buy the chassis, get your own motherboard, and do that. That is the point of the openness. I want to say again, the HL15 and the parts chosen for it on the full build is to hit the price point that we can hit the price point at, give you a system, and still allow you to grow and everything like that. But where we're at now is that is a couple of generations old. We are on our latest generation of the 8004, 9004, 5, AMD EPYC servers in our enterprise gear. So as we get more of that, that'll end up in the HL15. But also the other new middle brand that we launched that kind of got its start from Homelab was this 45 Pro, the 45 Professional line. And the point of this is to service managed service providers and anyone who wants to. Sorry, let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
We have an AMD EPYC CPU offering in the Pro 15, which is the essentially the HL15 with a little more customizations for MSP users and such like that. Why this brand exists is for MSPs and others like that, because when Homelab came out, there was a huge. The numbers were great. We had modest expectation for what was going to happen, and it greatly surpassed. And we have all the fans and customers and everyone thank for that. But going through the data, looking at everything and seeing who's buying and why they're buying, a lot of Homelab users, but there were a lot of MSP and people who were like installing these things in a couple dentist shops or you name it, businesses around, all the way up to massive MSPs to just a guy who has a couple contracts and stuff like that. So they loved the product, but they wanted a little service too, and they wanted a little everything. So now we've got the 45 Professional line, which is the perfect kind of marriage of all that enterprise magic that we say in Homelab that we pull from the other. It's the same tough hardware, same no shortcuts around the architecture choices, but it's the Homelab flexibility, usability, with some service, with some help, with some tools. And then we have a lot more planned for like Houston and everything, single pane of glass. Hey, you can manage a bunch of things distributed. So anyway, that was a long answer to not exactly what you asked. So yes, in time. And I saw a great plug to stick 45 Pro in there. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And there's, I think the question might be being asked because I think Wendell just did a video about what he's doing with his HL15, and I believe that's what he chose as an EPYC. And you can just buy the chassis and then get your own motherboard for it. I mean, granted, it's always nice to have something bought complete, but the other side is the customization. I love that you could just grab a chassis, and I think the people who follow this channel and many of the 45 Dredge channels are some of the DIY crowd as well. So
yeah, and remember the HL15, there's room. It's easy. Like, some servers you work with, it's getting in there and plugging the boards in can be.
It's easy to work with it.
Even the power distribution stuff, we made some choices in a way that you don't have to like get your hands in there. Like when you get the chassis only, if anyone's unfamiliar, all the storage bays and everything are already wired data and power. So all you do is drop that brain in there, plug in your HBA or on your motherboard, and you're ready to go. So.
Yeah, and it's well fabricated. That's the one thing, and it's cool because it lasts you several generations. You'll swap out different things in here because you have a nice, not cheap frame to put it all in. Especially has nice 15 bays in there.
Yeah.
Recommendations on literature for learning CFS. I would probably say I would start at Michael Lucas. I always joke he's not the guy that wrote a book on ZFS. He's the guy that wrote 2 books on ZFS. And so that is probably the guide, so to speak. I don't know if you've ever particularly read that book. Michael Lucas happens to live here in Michigan, and he's a really fun individual, but his ZFS book was written with people who are the developers. So he's not a developer. He's a very technical author, long time. For those who want to dig around Michael Lucas, he actually used to write, I get a kick out of this. He used to write a blog for or I wouldn't call it a blog back then, but just in a magazine called Big Scary Daemons for the Free BSD magazine. And so I just love the name. I'm like, that needs to come
great.
back. But he's worked in the tech industry for a long time, and he authors several technical books. He's got ones on DNS, SSH. His SSH one is one I recommend as well, but he's got the book on ZFS, Michael Lucas's book. What other recommendations do you have, Brett?
Less
the 45 Drives channel.
Yeah, the 45 Drives channel, Tom's channel, Wendell's channel. I'll go the opposite side. You asked for literature. Fair enough. Reading books and everything is great. Some people learn different. Some people like the videos, everything like that. So I'll echo with everything Tom just said there. There's all kinds of good stuff on the internet. I find ZFS is pretty good. Ceph, not so much on this, where sometimes be careful. You're reading something that's out of date. ZFS is pretty stable in the way of like, you read a doc, it's true. Anyway, the other point I want to make, and it's not so much literature, is, and you asked about benchmarking, I can give you some of that too. Pick an end goal for your project rather than just learning ZFS. Like, I find it's the quick way to have a learning adventure just stop of when you kind of like, well, where am I going with this? So definitely, I don't know, spin up some VMs. If you got some hardware, maybe check out a Homelab server or something like that, but definitely have something to play with as you're doing it, because it'll help make everything set in a little more. Try to pick an end goal. It helps the project get finished, at least for myself. And then command line utilities for benchmarking. FIO is always a good choice. Yep. I will warn you, great documentation, but a lot of options. So
yeah, I've done one video on FIO. And what I do is I also offered my code on GitHub that I use for it, just all the parameters essentially.
That's good. Yeah.
And that way you can, and I still think I understand at least the ones that I gave on there, and someone started asking more. I'm like, oh no, it'll probably do all the things you're requesting, but it's beyond what I understand. So I understand to test it with this, but as much as networking is black magic, so is file system benchmarking. There's so many different parameters on there.
Yeah, and there's so many parameters, especially file, like, so yeah, it's called flexible IO. That's why they called it that. But awesome. And again, it'll run a benchmark, but it's 100%. What does that benchmark mean? What workload did you just test? No one knows real workloads. I see it time and time again with customers, even in testing. Like, they'll be like, all right, we needed to do all this. Okay, we numbers. Okay, we go into testing. Okay, we do our initial testing. Okay, we turn on live production. All of a sudden, a bunch of new stuff happens. So clearly our synthetic benchmarks did not adequately represent what's going to happen in real life. And even I was in at Cephlicon just recently in Geneva, talking to some people, particularly someone from Canonical, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, no one ever knows their workload, and it's funny how it's not been figured out, but you nail it. It's black magic. I think the other part about benchmarking, and I'll end here, is it's benchmarking. It's best used to compare changes between things, not to give you a magic number of what's going to happen in real life. That's truly what it kind of is. And I think we've just taken it too far. It's like, I ran the benchmark, it says 1 gigabyte. When I run my small file single threaded application, it only goes 10 megabytes. What the hell? And you're just like, apples to apples. So that's my rant on benchmarking.
Yeah. And my final comment on benchmarking is there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's benchmarks. So.
Yeah. But I will say it again, I think some of it too is one thing that's been helpful to me is understanding what a benchmarking tool is. It is for measuring changes to a system, not necessarily for just like what's going to come out of the system. So if you keep that in your mind, you won't be as upset with your results sometimes differing from real life.
Yeah. And especially workloads are interesting because, like, at the very beginning, we talked about like the client with the falling over system when they were writing database applications. Databases generally, especially a large production database that has lots of writes. So if you're the application this client has, and social media, for example, let's say we have an application that runs a WordPress or a social media site, that's read intensive. But then if you have a lot of users, then it becomes write intensive. Read intensive is way easy to plan for because you're asking for the same things all the time. So the benchmark's going to be different. You're going to want a lot of cache in your ZFS. You're going to stick a bunch of RAM in there because it's going to do the same request. If we have to figure out how to document lots of writes, and then we have a transaction size. We have to first align our ZFS to the transaction size. Did we do our benchmarks the same way to know if that would perform? So you really have to think about like what your application workload, like if small block sizes means better for small writes, and that benchmark that you tested on in the non-production, did you have it set the same way? Did you do large? This is why FIO is great, but Phoronix, I just popped in my head. The Phoronix test suite, I really like that they've kind of consolidated, because you can actually set your block write size when you're doing file. Their FIO has a menu driven system to say, are you doing 1K writes or 8K writes or 64K writes?
Yeah.
And then you have to look up database applications, and you'll find even databases have all different commit sizes. Yeah. So now you have to align those things and then throw it all out the door, because it still only will be kind of close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have a ZFS storage calculator? Tell me how much.
Patrick is one of my favorite customers here at 45 Days. Good to see you, Patrick. Actually, remember he was at the
I recognize. I need to say hi to Patrick. I haven't texted him in a little while. So
nice.
He was definitely a great meeting him over at 45 Drives. There's a few different websites, like they're not off the top of my head, but I know when I searched
Wintel Guy ZFS.
That's the one.
Works great. Yep. We've even toyed around with making one ourselves a couple times. That should be good for SEO and everything like that. But also, shouts out to Wintel Guy, man. He's got a lot of calculators on there.
Yep.
Good stuff.
The Wintel one is definitely I think that's the top result, because as soon as you said Wintel, it's in my head now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, definitely works great for ZFS calculations. Would it be a good idea to run Ceph to pull XCP nodes together to create a storage and VMs and back them up to TrueNAS? That would be you could do it that way. That I have to understand your setup a little bit better. Yeah.
So what's he saying? Yeah, make Ceph storage, give that to XCP. It creates its volumes on there, and then we're going to back it off that onto a single TrueNAS. Okay.
Yeah, TrueNAS can be a backup storage target. Ceph, there is Ceph plugins for XCP-ng, so you can attach it directly. It speaks Ceph. That is an option. There was some. If you want to really try that, go in the forums for XCP-ng. There's several Ceph discussions in there, because there are. I don't remember exactly what it was, because we just don't use Ceph with our XCP-ng systems. If we're presenting it as NFS. So we're using presentation. That way we don't have to load any of the Ceph drivers, because there's someone said the Ceph drivers are a little bit older in XCP-ng. Like they don't have the newest version.
That is true.
Yeah. And that's why we just present when needed as a NFS.
Yep. That works too. And if you do want to go play down that route at that point too, like you probably be using Ceph RBD. So the block devices for the storage. And then how do you move those back to TrueNAS, or honestly any Linux BSD based NAS? Because you'd want to go block, and then if you are going to store it there, you'd be storing it as a file, so you're going to have to convert the two. Take a look at a tool called Backy2, like BACKY2. We've used it a couple of times. Really convenient way to just back up Ceph RBD volumes. They market broader, like general block devices, but it works really well with RBD devices too, and you can just kind of send them off anywhere.
So that's pretty cool.
Check that out.
Mr. Emerson has another question. He says, one more question. When do we move to Ubuntu 2204 for Houston?
Yep. That is coming early in the new year, Pat. We got our repos just about done in place there. We've got some final testings of just making sure service and everything. We've got all the things lined up for new deployments of Ubuntu and everything like that. But for any existing people, the big thing that you're waiting for is all that big repo support. So we did a lot of work here internally to rebuild our continuous deployment kind of pipeline on how we build packages. I'll be honest, we very manual about how we were building our things after, building our software tools and hosting it and everything like that. And we're trying to expand, we've got all these different brands and everything we're doing. And so we just have one big monolithic repository, and we had this. And so we had to break some things up there and do some architecture and planning. That stalled things a little bit. But that's nearing a close, and early in the new year, Pat, we'll get you updated.
Does Houston work well with Debian 12? I have not tested it.
I have not tested it myself.
Okay.
So my answer is going to be probably, because it's built on Cockpit. Remember, that's what we've always tried to do here. The Cockpit project, it works fine on that. We stay a little behind bleeding edge than they do, but we build our modules to all be polite to their neighboring modules as well too. So there might be a bump here and there, maybe in file sharing if Samba changes some things, but I don't see anything too crazy like that. In terms of like testing and guarantee, like Rocky, like really any of the L distributions, Ubuntu are the primary, and then everything else kind of as we fix stuff and everything like that. So
well,
should work fine.
I actually just reloaded my HL15 with Debian, so I will go ahead and do some testing with Houston. That is on my to-do list. That's actually why I was looking. I was for filming reasons, it's out of the server room and on the bench, and I realized, oh no, it's loud in here. I have a separate room for servers, so I don't think about sound, but then you do when you got it in the studio. So that was my Google search of what are some quiet fans. I'll make this part of the video.
Yeah, so you can change on the 15s, yeah, because like we did a bunch of stuff with Noctua after that too, where we've got a partnership and we can. Why don't we? Let me get Ashley to drop you. I think we can work something out.
Okay, cool.
If that's a route you want to go. Anyway, we'll just.
Noctua is the ones I was looking at. Easier Noctua or be quiet. I wasn't. That's the debate. I think that I seen in your forums. And I had to figure out which one I want to order.
Yeah. Well, you can, again, free and open, you can do that. But we can talk to, because we stock that. We've got the fan controllers. We've got everything. We make one easy purchase here too.
Perfect. So. Then I'll get it from you. So
okay.
Makes it easier.
All right. Well, I'll get Ashley to reach out and we'll get you in the, probably, you'll end up probably talking to Vic. So yeah. All right, cool.
Perfect. Next one we got here is with the new ZFS expansion functions, can you convert RAID Z1 to Z2? The answer is no. Nope.
Even the expansion functions, have you used that? Like one of the recent, like just expanding.
Yeah, I've tested it.
Z2s.
Yeah, I've expanded Z1. I've expanded Z2. I like it, but there is a imbalance problem you'll create. So if you add the drives, your existing data is still over there, and that is a hold on. Someone decided. All right, there you go. Forgot to mute something. The if you have 3 drives and you add 2 more, and you had 10 terabytes of data, your 10 terabytes still exist on those 3 drives, so you don't get the write performance right there. Is what it is. You can move the data off, move it back on, and it solves the problem. But yeah, the RAID Z1 to Z2. So I heard something interesting from the developers. I don't know if this is where this goes. This is people who actually wrote some of this, that they're technically from the command line is a way to convert a mirror into a Z1. I don't know if they can do Z1, but there's a way to convert mirrors, but they are never going to do it because what you'd mentioned about commands working forever in ZFS. ZFS is one of those companies or one of those design philosophies of we do things methodically and perfectionately. So we never want a reputation for data loss. And this is what happened to ButterFS. They tried to move quick to catch up. They made some bad decisions, and even though those bad decisions are now years old, people, if you say ButterFS, anyone in the enterprise file system goes, oh no. Back in 2018 or 2016, when they had this one problem. There's always that technician of, I had that one brand of hard drive fail on me in 2006, man, I'll never use that brand again. So when it comes to storage and your data and the pain of loss, ZFS moves in a way that I feel comfortable.
Well said. And I think that's it too. And especially storage, that thing's got to be rock solid. It's the foundation. It's boring on its own. It's useless on its own. It's everything on top of it that consumes that storage. But my God, if that storage goes down, like we had a little blip on our cluster this morning. Pesky file system snap trimming. I think it was like 10 minutes, but like, oh yeah, you feel it. You feel it. Everyone starts popping up. So, but it's funny you say that too, because one bad rep like that will destroy it, even because people just make their mind up on it and move on. But even CephFS, so you get Ceph the 3 ways. It can do object, block, and file system. So majority of the world uses it with object or with block. Block with OpenStack, object, which is about everything else. File system, it always was, because it's challenging. Like we said earlier, the black magic of file system benchmarking. I think it's just the black magic of file systems in general, especially scaling them, making them massive. Same thing, Cephlicon, just numerous people being like, oh, this one bug I heard of in 2019. Nope, never touching it, never touching it. And we're like, well, we do a lot of FFS work. We've seen this, and people are. It almost doesn't matter. Like you just they see one scary thing and then they run away. So I guess my point is to echo what you said. I feel safe with the way ZFS moves. I love it.
Yeah, and there's also there's a big challenge that comes with storage, and it's even with 10 or even 100 gig connections. It's not uncommon for people we talk to. I mean, I think this year I can't remember how many petabytes of storage we were discussing it. We want to do a year end. How many petabytes of storage did we buy from 45 drives? Because I think we bought 4 or 5 XL60s and a whole bunch of other ones from you guys. And one of the things is as those systems this is to upgrade some clients that had bought some before. Actually, a bunch of them go into the same client. It takes a long time to get all that data. When you talk about like even 600 terabytes of data. So if you have a problem, even though we have backups of it, there's still a challenge of, oh, I got a backup of it, but I got to move the data from over here to here, even though it's in the same, a lot of this is geolocated in one data center for this client here in Detroit. It just takes a long time. We kick off the job and like, I'll see you next week. Like this isn't going to be finished while I'm here. It's like, let me know when the file transfer is done. And so that's why storage is like one of those, it's such a foundation. It has to be rock steady because you don't want to have to redo it. It just takes, it's a big time suck because the project is on hold until the data is moved off of it. Like someone wanted us to reconfigure the ZFS array. They wanted to lay it out differently. Well, you can't without moving the data. So, all right, we got to take this 600 terabytes of data and buy another server, move it to that server, redo the array, and then we'll move it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've got your network pipes that has to move it around and everything's getting denser and denser. Actually, that reminds me of another thing that we've been talking about a lot here with the hard drive vendors and everything. Like, everything's getting bigger and bigger and denser and denser. So the same problem that you just described there of an XL60 with like damn near petabyte of storage in it, but maybe a 10 gig pipe, like even 25, that's still a lot of data you got to move through there. Yeah. We're going to go to hard drives. So Seagate is sending us, I can't wait, it'll be a little late Christmas present, but some new 30 terabyte hammer drives. Like those are cool. The new like laser activated way they do all the writing. It's crazy. They've been talking about making those since like the 70s, pretty much. Like it's one of these long that it finally works. So we're actually going to see them. They've been telling me about them for the last 5 years, but I'm actually getting one in January. I can't wait to see it. But what I'm getting at is hard drives aren't getting any faster, but we're making them bigger and bigger. And it's almost like we're building a massive skyscraper that goes to space, but there's one elevator.
Yeah.
Like at a certain point, it's just like, and I'm well aware what the problem is, but I don't know how to solve it yet. And the other thing that we're seeing too is like the hard drive vendors will talk to us and say, why don't you sell more? Like our distribution is more kind of like 16, 18 terabytes. And then it droops off a little bit as you get denser and denser. And why aren't you selling as many dense drives? Like they're bigger drives. Doesn't everyone want bigger drives? And you're like, well, software-defined storage doesn't like bigger drives. It's harder to recover and everything like that. And then you go to the Ceph people and you ask the developers there, you're like, so what's our plan about bigger and denser drives? Like we can't just say 18 terabytes forever. And then the two of them go, oh, it's like, wow, there's a gap here. So I don't know. It's I think it's one of the next kind of big things that we got to solve here. We can't just keep making stuff bigger without changing the kind of paradigm of how we move data around.
Yeah. But it is interesting because and I'm sure you guys got some consulting calls like this as well. People that laid the system out wrong and then realized it. I mean, I think they're getting better, but I mean, if you're building ZFS from the command line, it's not going to warn you not to make a 30 drive wide VDEV. I will warn you not to do that. Yeah. But if I'm not there when you did that, and then you took the time to write all the data, and I couldn't believe this person, because of the VDEV being so wide, it was taking forever to write. But they just let it keep running and writing and writing and writing. And after a few weeks, it was done. That's when they decided to, because they needed to get the data where they needed to. And they thought they could reconfigure it after. And I was like, no. And it's like, well, we got the old server. We don't trust it enough to put all the data back on the old server. And I'm like, They ended up renting a server. That was the only solution they could come up with, is they rented a server to copy all the data back again to somewhere else because they didn't trust their old server. So then they could reconfigure the drives into a not 30 wide VDEV.
Yeah. We like you said, we have worked with those before.
Yeah.
And you get some people are almost, they're mad mad about it. And you're like, fair enough. Goes back to our other point of like educating people, making a plan. And as a vendor, especially in our position at 45 drives, the community can be a little bit more like, do your homework. But us as a vendor, like we don't accept that. You can't talk to them like that. The customers, like they're different than me. You have to make it easy for them, and it's back to our whole documentation thing again. So, but yeah, we've had the same thing, and then sometimes you get the gracious ones in. I know one in particular. He doesn't work at the company anymore that bought the gear, but him and I stayed connected. He did that 30 drive, made a mess. And then when I met him in person later, he's like, "Hi, I'm the guy who did that. Yeah, I know that was a bad idea, but thanks for helping me." And I was just like, yeah, he's like, "I learned so much." And it's like, yeah. It's a great way to learn as long as you didn't lose something critical.
Yeah. It's funny. I need to make a few more of the videos. And the reason I can answer this question is I've actually done a video on this topic.
Perfect.
But it's old. So could ZFS run a test to distribute the data after expand would not be in real time? It could be like scrub tasks. Well, there's actually someone who wrote a really simple utility you can find on GitHub. And the reason utility exists is not to solve the ZFS expansion problem. It's to solve a problem I did a video on like 8 years ago, which is imbalanced VDEVs. So you can technically expand ZFS. If I have 8 drives in a VDEV, I can add 8 more drives in another VDEV. The problem is now we've created the same exact problem of all the data was already here and we need to get over here. So someone actually wrote some scripts that automatically will do this, and they can run and rebalance the VDEVs. But this works 100% the same way if you added one drive to a single VDEV as opposed to adding a whole nother VDEV. There's also it's totally not recommended, but home users definitely did it, which is of course why I did it. When you're messing with ZFS, and you do these imbalanced VDEVs, you can do them asymmetrically if you force them to, where you can have 4 drives on one side and like 8 drives on the other. And it will do a math equation to take the writes and put 1/4 of the writes on the 4 drives and 3/4 of the writes on 8 drives. It'll actually work, but you get the weirdest performance problems out of it. It's not recommended in any way, but someone said, "Can you?" And I'm like, well, I'll show you that not only can you, I'll show you what happens when you do. Like functionally it works, but you get a starvation problem where it can't perform faster once the data split, because it goes, these drives gave me the data fast because I can chunk the writes across 8, but if I only have 4 on the other side, I can't chunk them properly. So yeah, there's always ways to do it, but not always recommended. And I always like to show people the why.
Well, because then they go, what's the answer? And you go, like the sales team here always laughs at us every time when we say, well, it's this or this. It depends.
Yes.
This is how we start everything. And they go, oh, it depends. But no, but the reality is it depends. There's never one answer for someone. I think I even saw a question right there. Ceph or ZFS, what one do you prefer? It depends what my application is. But jokes aside on that, you don't use that as a deflector. It's just,
It's the same challenge with like this question here. ZFS 3-way mirror, good popular choice for a small drive count to maximize resiliency. You get good resiliency with the VDEVs. It comes down to performance and storage efficiency. So you can be less efficient in your storage, and RAID Z3 is wonderful, but it's less efficient. So do we do Z2? Well, now we're a little bit less fault tolerant, or you go, I need to maximize my budget per storage ratio. So I go Z1. And the same thing with doing mirrors. You just have a series of, it depends. And it comes down to like your use case.
Yep. And then it's your use case. And then, so one thing we've started asking is like, what's more important to you? Like with the data going on, this is like, is it the most critical? Can't ever lose it. Okay. What's accessing it? Samba share, a couple of humans browse through it every once in a while. Okay, well, you don't care about performance at that point. So it's just like you kind of help try to guide them that way. Some people know their answer right away. Some people need a little more help. Another way that we try to do that too, you go Ceph, where they go file system, block, or object. And I go, well, what's consuming the storage? What do you mean? Is it a human? Is it virtual machines? Or is it some like program, or something? Like if it's a machine, a program, probably wants objects because you're going to be making a lot of unstructured one. You're going into hypervisors, VMs, they're going to want block because you're going to do that. Humans, file system.
Yeah.
And if you follow that kind of general rule, things will work for you. And it's not just Ceph. That's just kind of true for all those three protocols.
Exactly. Good point. Do you think ZFS will get better with NVMe drives? It's actually really good on NVMe drives. There's not a problem with them. The challenges are when you put NVMe drives, consumer ones specifically, and they don't have the same queue depth, you're just not getting the performance you expected out of them.
Yep.
But it's not like a limitation of ZFS. It's usually more a limitation of the drives. It's a matter of fact, I actually like, and I want to play with it a little bit more, but Steve Gibson from GRC, he's got his podcast, but he does SpinRite. And he's talked a lot about, in his new SpinRite tool, showing some of the real benchmarks for NVMEs and how you test them in different sections of the drive and how those performance variations are great. Because he does things like disable some of the error correction tools. So SpinRite boots up as its own OS, then disables a lot of error correction so we can get down to the nitty gritty of an actual drive and then do different performance testing on it. And it's been enlightening. He's got a ton of documentation he's created from it. His tool is really neat. And it starts showing where, maybe the manufacturers put a number on there that's not realistic.
They wouldn't do that.
No. I mean, it's one of those things. It's, I remember early in tech days, everyone used to argue about the size of monitors because they used to follow the TV standards where they measured corner to corner. Yeah. Wait a minute. This isn't that big of a monitor. It's this big. They said it was a 19-inch monitor. Well, yeah, from the best way we could possibly measure it, it is, it is the marketing. That's the biggest we can get away with without getting in trouble, right?
Yeah. That reminds me too of, it still happens here and there, but it used to really happen as we started getting the denser hard drives. But I bought all these 16 terabyte hard drives, and my computer says they're only 14 terabytes. And you're like, no, terabytes. And they're like, what? Like, yeah. And immediately how quick people are like, they lied. The manufacturer lied. No. Where's my extra space? And you're like, no, you didn't lose it. And it was funny how like quick that came up constantly. And then, it's mainly just because as drives we got into the teens of terabytes, you could really notice it because like down below that you just didn't really
think about it as much. Yeah, but yeah, when you're really getting there, does ZFS support global hot spares? Yes. Yep. Global hot spares are a nice feature. It's kind of weird the way they handle it. When you have a global hot spare in ZFS, it will automatically drop in. So a drive falls out, hot spare drops in, but when you replace it ejects the hot spare and replaces it with the one you put back in. I say that's weird because you have to promote it. There's an option to promote the hot spare to being a permanent one and then adding the hot spare. I prefer to do it that way. I usually promote it if a hot spare falls in. And the only reason I do that is because if it ejects the hot spare, now the hot spare is out of the pool and we have to resilver a second time. The first time the hot spare comes in, it resilvers right away. We've already went through the pressure of resilvering. We've already put the pressure on all the drives. We take the performance hit while it resilvers. Resilvering's done. Oh, cool. I got time to go to the data center and swap a drive or buy a drive and one comes in. You're just restarting that cycle again. Why restart it? Just make that one the hot spare. I wish it did that automatically, but it doesn't. It wants, unless you do the promote, you just have to do that extra step to say promote to be a permanent resident of this VDEV, and then you can add another hot spare. So say, sure, it depends because overall some might prefer another. Personally, I prefer Ceph for me just because I have an S3 compliant storage out of the box and without mucking around with MinIO and stuff. Yeah,
you're right, but at the same time, because it works for your application. That was all the point I was making. But I think why my answer always ends up being very depends is from our point of view of 45. Like we work with a bunch of different people and a bunch of different things, and people have different needs and stuff like that. So one thing that ZFS does superior to damn near anyone else, sends and receives file systems, and to back things up and to move things around. It's great. Ceph, on the other hand, solves all the distribution problems that we were talking about earlier. Pop a new drive in, it's just constantly balancing itself, moving things around. I got tiering. Ceph is so much more featureful than ZFS. It does more. So that's why it's kind of hard to compare the two. I could compare CephFS and ZFS, but even then, that's still an apple and a smaller apple. So that's why I don't want to say one bad or the other. I personally like Ceph because it can do everything and it's fun and it's what we spend most of our time in. But like, again, some people are like, I just need a box and I need to back it up really easily. Use ZFS.
Yeah. And Ceph also has a cost of ownership to get started. It's not, it has a higher level of complexity to get started. Well, definitely, because if you want a single storage space spread across many, many systems for your distribution, your erasure coding, that is not something you are definitely talking about something where I would push Ceph all the way, because you can't do that with ZFS. That's not, ZFS just doesn't have that.
It's not what it's designed for. That was
not what it's designed for. But we sell more ZFS for storage targets for VMs because usually the requirement is performance. I want a really high performant thing. My budget's not unlimited. I mean, you can build a performance Ceph system, but that same level of performance, if they want a single ZFS store, I can build it cheaper. And budgets aren't unlimited. And some of the high-end systems that we sell for clients that are sitting in the data centers often run ZFS for their storage target with NFS, because that's the price point at which it works well. And maybe they'll graduate and have a budget big enough for a whole rack of Ceph stuff, but that's not where their job was. Because a couple of the projects that I'm going to be doing videos on that we're completing, they're all targeted at ZFS storage for that reason. It fit the client's budget. And by the way, they spent $80,000 on their storage server. So it's not a cheap storage server at all.
Exactly.
But if they would have built the exact same thing in Ceph, it would have been more than that to get the same level of performance they got. So it can be done. Absolutely. You guys have had some incredible benchmarking things you've shown for how performant you can make Ceph. And with the tiered storage options where you can say, hey, here's my long-term storage and here's the stuff that needs to be fast. Beautiful, because you don't get to, you create separate pools for that in ZFS, which creates a different level of complexity. Ceph is like, here's one storage space, here's the good stuff, here's the slower stuff, and we'll magic it all in the back end.
And then you just got some limitations of Ceph is a scale out networked cluster. So if, like you said about performance, if that like as low latency performance as possible is required, you're inherently always going to be better with the ZFS box because it only has to make one network hop to the storage and back. Ceph, incredibly resilient, safe, HA. We can make it fast, but like you're just kind of understanding the trade-offs of everything, right? So anyway,
because it's understanding how sync rights work, because in order if I truly want the proper resiliency and I have multiple boxes, I have to write to the storage, but I can't let go of that right until it's committed to whatever the minimum amount of erasure coding. I'm using the word right? Yeah. Okay. Making sure I got all that still retained in my head.
Well, sorry, erasure coding. Erasure encoding would technically be the rights, but
that one. But you have to make sure it's whatever those commits are to say what level of resiliency you want. We have to commit those rights. So from the network that the hypervisor's on to the Ceph, that would be the public side of the Ceph, and then the private side of the Ceph, we've got to commit those to the other system. And if we have a 25 gig on the public side of the Ceph, the private side of the Ceph would need 100 gig to get the same level of performance. Yeah. So that extra complexity means there may be some performance challenges to get that going.
And then on the flip side, maybe someone's like, I don't care, performance is going to be good enough. That sounds good. This thing cannot go down. It needs to be up all the time. And I need my VMs to always stay hot. Great. Cluster some Proxmox, cluster some Ceph storage. You're laughing. But again, the point of open source storage and the point of vendors selling open source storage is having options, helping people understand what their end goal is, and letting them be flexible enough. Back to your point, we talk about budget. Oh, I assume they don't have any money. No. Spend $80,000 on that server. They know what they wanted, but people want to buy the right thing for them. It feels tailored. You take the project away from them. You give them exactly what they're looking for, and not strong arming them into, nope, we only do clusters. Clusters is the only right way. And if you think about it another way, you're wrong. It's like, no, that's not why we do business. We do business to empower our people, our customers.
And there can be times where, man, there's a lot of unusual setups that we've run into. The hypervisor system may be all sitting on top of CFS because they want it to boot really fast and everything else. But then the application uses some type of object storage that's somewhere else. And they're going, that can be on its own, because we can't lose any of these financial transactions that go in this database. We want the system to boot up really fast, but the financial transactions are all pointed at the Ceph cluster because of the encoding we need, because no one, there are power outages at companies that run banking software. You don't want that deposit not to get tracked.
Yeah, not happening.
Yeah, those type of applications are so critical that every write must be validated and committed. If you ever wondered why the banking apps, by comparison to social media apps, seem slow when you go through them, there's a lot of it, because I've worked with some of them. There's a lot of engineering on the back end, because it's resiliency is the first building block of everything they have to do before it gets presented to you on a bank statement through your web UI.
Absolutely. Yeah.
DPC Technology. I know he's got a cool HL15. Thoughts on Pro 4s for, I'm assuming, backup disaster recovery?
Okay, good acronym.
Yeah, Pro 4. That is I'm assuming the Pro 4 model you guys have. That should work as a BDR.
I'd be perfect as a BDR. So for those who are unaware, the Pro 4 is a very similar product to the HL4 and the HL8 that we came out with the same kind of tear I gave earlier. The Pro line is a little more flexible, IPMI server-based, server boards, IPMI on there, all those things you want to do for remote management. But great, they'd be a great tool for a backup tool. And actually, that's something we're working on right now. Actually, the expansion of some Houston tools. Houston right now is great to manage a single server. You know what? It does that job pretty well. Well, you have a bunch of servers you need to manage. Cockpit's got the kind of built-in feature where I can jump from server to server, and that's nice. I can get there, but I'm still going from pane to pane, if you will. Not pane as in like pain, Windows pane. Yeah, I'll move on. So what we're doing is we're making we want to kind of make an overview, at a glance, dashboard, all those buzzwords, if you will, but somewhere you can come in and you can just see maybe all the Pro 4s, the Pro 15s, couple of your enterprise lines, whatever, 45 drive servers on there, and make things easy like this, these backup tools. Because what we see here is, from what we're understanding in the MSP world, is like you guys got to go and you guys got to please all your millions of customers. We have a lot of customers too. And as much as I'd love to just roll the sleeves up and like fix everything ourselves or do that, like I need a tool, I need a GUI, just go click, 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 there, backup set up, I'm moving on. In no way could I not have figured it out, but like you just don't have time for that. So what I'm getting at here is we're going to further develop some tools here to make this backup process easy for everyone. So you can maybe draw you yourself, or maybe you've got even just a junior hire that you came in here. Here's the Pro 4, go slap it in, plug it in, and then from your desk over there, you're going to drag it into the Houston thing, and you're going to configure the backup. Boom, done. Now we've got the office running. So right now, great for backup. It's going to be even better though when you get the software tools on top of it to help.
Yeah, and I imagine as I know DPC Technology, they're MSP down in Florida. I don't know exactly what they use for backups, but if they use like Veeam,
exactly,
it's a great target. Those would work good, because we always, no matter what you're using, we currently use a lot of Veeam at CNWR, but we always have something on site like that, so we can have a local copy of it. Veeam will facilitate that. So will if you're using like MSP 360, a lot of the MSP tooling for backups, they often look for and have an option to run to a local device, and that would be a good local device for that.
Perfect. And that's what I love too. You nailed it right there. Is most MSPs is like, it's the thing I say all the time here is just like, don't screw with people's workflow. That's like, if you go tell them they have to change all their tooling to use this new server, just put the phone down, close the email, like don't even bother. Like the workflow is the part that's got to imagine. And so learning more about the MSP world is all these tools. Like, so being pluggable, being able to play with everyone and stuff like Veeam, all these tools, like we love Veeam. Veeam's getting so much more Linux. Like they're the most enterprise legacy feeling company who's championing that world, but also so embraces the Linux world as well too.
Yeah.
Because one of their next versions of Veeam, they're going to run natively on Linux, which is big. You don't always have to use
Windows. Oh yeah. Trust me. We are happy about that. So
yeah. But to just close my point off before I ramble too far, plugging things in and working with each individual tooling or that someone would use already is imperative. Changing people's workflow is going to, unless you have a real reason to do it.
Yeah.
Don't want to, but also in that way of maybe someone's running a small business and I got two people that work on, and they don't have a Veeam license. They don't, or maybe they're starting from scratch. So to give them like, here's a clear path that we know works with our tooling. If you want to go off path at one point and plug it into something else, sure. And then, so that's how we're going to maintain that open and flexibility that we put out in our marketing here at 45.
That's awesome. I don't know. Let's see. 45 release chassis that will support longer graphics cards.
Yeah, good question. That comes a lot. So when we put the HL15, well, just I'll outline the problem for everyone right now. The HL15 intentionally at first, here's a storage machine. The motherboard chamber fits an ATX motherboard, and a little bit after that to get the fans and everything like that. But most modern big graphics cards don't fit in the current motherboard chamber right now. I've seen some pretty interesting ways we've had people solve that problem, whether externally and stuff like that. But there has been a large desire for people to want to have the chamber to fit it. And the only trade-off then is like, it's already a relatively large box. I mean, if you're putting the rack, it's not the end of the world. Desk mount gets a little big. So yeah, it's in progress to have a look at doing a longer one, because just give people what they want right in there. So
yep. That's cool.
Yes.
I'll get these last few questions for coming up towards the hour and a half mark.
Okay.
Would you do an episode of the Proact IT podcast? And I don't know if that's me or Brett, but yeah, reach out to me, reach out to Brett, or reach out to the people at 45 Drives, and they're easy enough to find on the socials. So
yeah. And we'll get on and ramble about anything. So we love to talk, right? So.
Yes, that's what I do too. That's why these always go a little longer than we expect.
Yeah, I know. Actually, it's true. Every time, even with our own podcast and everything, tell them it's like, all right, we shoot for an hour. They almost always go over, which is great because that means you're having a good conversation.
Yeah. HPE's Altera MP uses NVMe over Fabric to head units to create storage nodes internally. You can get more performance with more head units, more storage, or more disk units, all switched out 100 gig. Yeah, there's some neat stuff coming out in terms of like that type of fabric. I hope it comes to a good standard that's open, because that's what will bring it to market. The Patrick at Serve the Home told a really interesting story when he talked about the earlier Broadcom merger thing. It was something else Broadcom did, because apparently there was a company that started building these really cool switching fabrics, and they became popular very quick, and Broadcom quickly bought them and wrapped them up in licensing. And they said that's the reason. They said it was like a promising technology, and Broadcom snatched the company in their early stages because they had already landed a bunch of large enterprise customers. And then they jacked up the price like 4,000% to the enterprise customers because they had already built pieces of data center with it. Because it was never an open standard, it kind of fell off and done that. So I like the concept of some of these really cool switching fabric things, but if it's not open, it's the same reason that superior things to USB never caught on. This USB caught on because of the openness. We aren't using FireWire, even though at the time FireWire was superior to USB, because if I'm not mistaken, it was all the licensing. That has kind of been a repeated thing through history of these standards are cool, and I love new innovative hardware, but I don't know enough to answer whether or not that's open and if it's going to be popular or not. I don't know if you know much more about it.
No, I got the same take on it as well too. We're watching eagerly. I mean, it seems a great way to do things. You're getting adoption all over. Ceph's implementing it as a replacement of iSCSI. They're doing it more as a protocol thing than actually like native NVMe over fabrics. They're like, so you can present block devices that way, which is cool. But one thing we're seeing too is like people talk about it, but then there's not a whole lot of end clients that like have good native support for it. I like VMware does now. Windows doesn't have an initiator for it yet. Linux does, but Linux does, so that works well too. So anyway, we're eagerly watching. I mean, I was like, oh, this is going to be the next greatest thing, and it just seems to be progressing. And to your point about the Broadcom buying and it kind of dying, I think like that's it. That's what kills anything. It's like we wholeheartedly believe the lock in of the corporate nature like that, like the corporate pen stroke, and boom, all of a sudden this primary technology is gone somewhere else. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Like I said, I don't know enough about it. The person to ask is probably Wendell, because I think he's done the videos on a couple different variations of this. I don't know if there's good open design standards for it. Then I think it'll flourish and it'll become popular, and I'm here for it. I'm excited about the technology. I love a lot of this, but it of course comes down to that openness.
Well said. Well said.
All right, do we have any more questions from people here? Remember Betamax? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. It was the superior format. I believe Technologies Connections guy has done a video on the history of Betamax, which was pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, it's a tale as old as time. And it keeps repeating itself. Look, what was it? Blu-ray and then HD. DVD?
Yeah. There was the other
I
one.
don't even remember what it was called.
Blu-ray.
And then why did Blu-ray win? Because Sony put them in the PS3. And then it was just like, all right, cool.
Yep. Good standardization, good adoption for it. Yeah. HDMI is becoming the same way. Wendell's rants on HDMI. Watch any of it. Look up. The dude bought like an incredibly expensive HDMI tester. One of his videos, I was watching it when they were talking about how he's developing it, and his editor did the funniest thing. Wendell's going on a really technical dive, and the video pauses, and it says, "Speeding this up, this rant will go somewhere else for the next 20 minutes." Apparently, Randall another 20 minutes. His editor put something like that on there, and I was like, "This is great."
That is awesome.
He is. When you ask him about it, I believe he was on Linus Tech Tips when they were talking about his HDMI switcher. I mean, he really did the homework on all the challenges, because Wendell was doing validation testing on whether or not companies were following the standards with the pins properly, and learning they weren't.
Yeah.
And Brett's not surprised, because we both spent time with Wendell, and that is the most Wendell thing ever.
Yeah. He
is a very detail-oriented, very wealth of knowledge person, and I was so excited. Gamers Nexus went and hung out at his place, and the behind the scenes was great. I watched all of that video, because there's so many projects that they're just like, what is this? And he's going, that was a robotics competition where I built this and built this.
Yeah.
And Wendell just released his video that he built a machine to figure out the accuracy of Steve from Nexus Gamer or Gamers Nexus, his dice, whether or not they were balanced properly. So he built an AI system with a webcam that kept rolling the dice and looking at what numbers, and then doing all the probability of if one of the numbers came up more than the other.
Weighted. Oh my God, I love it.
That's like that is a Wendell thing. Like, if I just told you that someone did that, you go, was it Wendell?
Yeah.
That was the only other question you'd ask for that.
So what was the result? Was he cheating?
I don't remember. I think he did find that because they have these little copper pieces in there that they're a little offset, and it'll roll a 20 a little more often than it should.
I'm sure they already have that tech, but they should call the casinos up.
There we go. Yeah. Wendell can repurpose this, because he's using the new, what is it called? The new thing from NVIDIA, the little board that they have.
Oh, yeah.
The new dev board they have that does the AI stuff. I can't remember the name of the
little guy. Yeah, I don't forget, but I saw the picture of it the other day. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Pretty cool device. All right. I'll answer the last couple questions. Let's see what someone had. I'm using Graylog in our company, domain controller logs, once a month retention enough. What's the best duration? The best duration for logging is driven by how much storage you have, or more importantly, driven by your insurance company and what their policies are on your data retention. So my friend that works in medical, they have, I think he told me, it's something like 12 or 15 petabytes of storage that's dedicated to logging, because of the size of the company he is. It's insane, the retention quality in medical, in order for them to do this. So they log everything. It's a lot less in the other industries. So how long you should keep it? 30 days isn't bad. That's enough time to help unravel an incident. But if you're in what we always call compliance encumbered industry, as in there are specific sets of rules, whether it be ITAR, CMMC, or whatever, and they may have certain logging rules. So it's more of a business driven approach. But how long do you want to look back? If you find out something's wrong in your network, it's all the amount of time you want to go and look back. And that's often driven by how much storage do you have to dedicate to this? I mean, I keep a lot more than I need because I happen to have a lot of storage. But if I was, we don't have that much, we only have about 30 employees. There's just not that much transactional data to track through all of that for us. So it's not an easy, hey, it's just like earlier. It depends.
Yeah.
And I just started with what it depends on. I could have said it depends, but we'll say at the end.
Yeah. No, right. We joke about like that here all the time. We're just like, oh, we got to put that on the t-shirt. Just like sayings that come up around the company all the time. So it depends is one of them. There's a lot of internal specific ones, but I don't know. Yeah. I need a it depends t-shirt now.
Yeah, it depends. What do you need help with? Because it depends on the answer. All right. Yes, Jetson is the box. It's called is it Jetson or Jetson Nano? I don't remember. It's cool. It's a neat little box. I definitely check it out. I think NVIDIA's got, because it's half the price as the last one and way more powerful. So it has more features and less price. That's technology working the right way. Yeah. That's what we like to see. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. This was awesome. Thanks for being on, Brett. Amazing here. I think we answered a lot of Ceph and ZFS questions for people. So hopefully there'll be some more comments later and we'll have some fun with all those people too. So thank you everyone who could join us live here and we'll see you next time.
See ya.